Hello, welcome to Humanities 140, Critical Thinking in the Modern Age. Today's discussion will be on micro-messaging. Before we get into micro-messaging, I wanted to talk about how we develop as human beings. And what we call this is the bioecological model of development. And it is intersectional, meaning that we are impacted by many different elements of socialization. Everything from our family and our friends out to our neighborhood, the media, political systems, where we live, and the income of our family. Previously, the research showed that we were a nature versus nurture argument. Meaning, what is most important? Nature, meaning our inborn traits like genetics, versus nurturing, traits we learn through interacting with others, also known as socialization. So, several years ago, 20 years ago probably, the researchers recognized that it wasn't a versus scenario. Instead, it was a plus scenario. And people are deeply influenced by both nature and nurture. Our biology, our psychology, which includes things like how we see the world, if we're positive or negative, how we cope with trauma, etc. And then our social interactions with our family, friends, schoolmates, etc. So all of these things are combined to create you. And as such, everyone is very different in the world because everyone has different experiences. Now, our family has the strongest influence on us developing biases at a very young age. We are not born feeling prejudice, rather we learn it through socializing. And research has shown that attitudes about race are formed early, usually around ages 3 and 4, which points to the fact that there is a clear correlation between a child's prejudice and their parents' opinions. So if you grow up in a household where your mom or dad really hates a particular race and you hear it being discussed on a regular basis, we as children are going to agree with our parents because they are our world. Now, we also need to look at where we come from in terms of our socioeconomic status. And it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian. If your family is middle class, they are more likely to engage in a process called concerted cultivation. And this is designed to draw out a child's talents and skills. So the child who gets signed up for soccer, the child who gets signed up for gymnastics or dance class. Some children are signed up for a multitude of activities. And the idea is to help a child figure out what they are good at. And this is historically referred to as the middle class. Whereas lower income socioeconomic status families rely more on the concept of the accomplishment of natural growth, in which a child's development unfolds spontaneously, and the parent makes sure that the child has basic comfort, food, and shelter. So these children are not necessarily going to be signed up for dance class or soccer or basketball. Rather, they may play pickup games on the playground or, stand in front of their TV and follow the dance moves. And oftentimes, it's not that the parents don't want their child to learn how to do these things. It's that they're expensive. How do you get the child to and from activities? And most importantly, as a parent, your thought is, do I feed my child or do I take my child to soccer? And for most people, it's not a question. You have to feed and shelter your child. And this group is historically referred to as the working class. In 2003, Annette LaRue published an extensive study of middle class and poor families. Some of the findings included the fact that middle-class children lived very structured lives and were engaged in multiple activities, but had less free playtime. On the other hand, poor children led much less structured lives, with much fewer activities, but way more free playtime. Consequently, middle-class children develop a more individualized self-concept, meaning they develop the sense of confidence and a sense of entitlement that they're due certain things. Poor and working-class children have a hard time negotiating their way through various social institutions effectively, which is why you see a lot of poor or working-class kids start college but are unable to complete it because of the various and sundry complications that arise that they are unable to solve. Another very important aspect to how we are socialized is the media, because it is the one thing that most of us engage in at some point during our day or our week. According to a 2010 study by the University of Michigan Health System, the average child under the age of 12 watches between 28 and 32 hours of television per week. And 71% of children between the ages of 8 and 18 have a TV in their room. And a lot of this comes down to the fact that it's not always safe to leave your kids out in the yard to play. And of course, you don't always live in an environment where going outside is even practical. So we have to keep in mind that our children are being exposed to a vast amount of information that is shaping their perspective. How a culture is portrayed on TV or in the movies, on the internet, or in music, or even a video game will often determine a person's opinion of those kind of people. So we have to be very aware that our children are impacted every day, sometimes 30 hours a week, just on different ways people see the culture. Now, here is a catalog page from the Land's End catalog from 2012. This is a young man if you're looking for a boy's satchel or backpack. Now notice what it says. Super light, superhero tough. And of course, what little boy doesn't want to be a superhero? So it's very positive, and it kind of gives you as a parent the idea that your kid's going to grow up to be awesome, like a superhero. Now, on the next page of the same catalog, you had this picture. And this is for a girl. You have Chloe, and she has a little bag, or a duffel bag, and a knapsack. But look what it says. Light as a feather, tough as long division. This is what we call a micro-inequity. As a young person flipping through a catalog, you see that boys have the potential to be superheroes, but girls have a problem with math. And this is in fact one of the big issues that we deal with in society, is the stereotypes that we assign different genders and races. Some of the smartest people in the world are women, and they don't have any problem with long division. But instead, we're using this idea that math is hard to sell backpacks. Now, as I've mentioned before, we also have other agents that influence us as we grow up. We have our siblings and our peers. The people that we count as friends oftentimes will put us in certain situations that we may not be comfortable with, but we're not going to let them know we're not comfortable, because then we're not cool. So we are influenced oftentimes by the people we hang out with. Our school, our religion, and whether or not we engage in sports. Research shows that girls who engage in sports are more likely to be aggressively competitive, meaning they have the same level of competition as a man may have, which is great for them in terms of their life, but a lot of people feel that it's not ladylike. So we have different expectations that oftentimes come from the influence of these agents. When someone learns behavior so well, they become internalized. This means that the behaviors are normal to them. So think about brushing your teeth or tying your shoe. You don't have to walk yourself through the steps because you've been doing it probably daily for most of your life. However, experiences can change a person's expectations, such as being around minorities and seeing them for who they are instead of how they were taught to see them. And sociologists call this contact theory. This little quote by Dennis Leary is absolutely so accurate about children. Racism isn't born, it's taught. He has a 2-year-old boy. Know what he hates? Naps. End of list. And really, that's very true. Little kids don't understand race because it's not relevant to them until it becomes relevant when mom and dad start telling them to not hang out with certain groups. As we grow into adulthood, we discover that we must engage a filter to ensure we do not offend someone. However, this doesn't mean that our prejudice goes away. Rather, it's now called an implicit bias, meaning it's gone underground. The way we think about these things are unconscious biases that affect the way we think and make decisions. So, again, what you have to think about is some people work very hard to eliminate bias from their perspective. But even so, there's still that unconscious or implicit bias that is there, and that does still inform us on how we make these choices. So, what are the effects of unconscious bias? It influences how we reach decisions from our gathering, sorting, and filtering of information. And it influences our evaluations of people and their value. So, this unconscious bias has a tremendous impact on how we interact with the world. So, let's talk about micro-messaging. They are small, subtle, semi-conscious messages sent and received when we interact with others. And a micro-affirmation can make you feel valued, included, encouraged, positive, that you have great intentions, whereas a micro-inequity can make you feel excluded, devalued, discouraged, negative, and unintentional. So the concept we really want to talk about here is how do we impact those around us in a more positive way and avoid those things we call micro-inequities. Mary Rowe from MIT pioneered the work of studying micro-messaging beginning in the early 1970s. So this is not a new concept. It's been around for a long time. Since then, it is applied in the business world to enhance retention, meaning keeping good employees, and building diversity. And here's the thing with diversity. Studies have shown that the more diverse a company is in terms of gender, race, perspective, the better the company does. And you see companies like JP Morgan Chase, Starbucks, IBM. Two of the most diverse companies in the world are Disney and Coca-Cola. And again, their concept of building diversity allows them to become more successful. Within the world of higher education, micro-messaging is seen as a way to ease some of the frustrations of first-generation and non-traditional students, meaning that if you know how to apply macro-affirmations to people, it's just basically a compliment, and you can make them feel better about themselves. And ultimately, when you feel better about yourself, you will have more confidence to achieve things. Micro-message small behaviors that have a big impact. And there's two kinds. We have micro-affirmations, which are positive, and micro-inequities, which are negative. Micro-inequities devalue and discourage a person. Now, the next thing is very important. Individuals who belong to groups that have been historically excluded and devalued because of their differences from the dominant society, and in the U.S., that is white, male, Protestant, may have a stronger reaction to micro-inequities. So, one of the criticisms you hear a lot is how minorities are so sensitive to things. Well, the reality is that they have a lot to be sensitive about, because for the past 300 years, African Americans have been devalued in this country. So of course they're going to be more aware of it. So some of the examples of micro-inequities include using male examples and pronouns exclusively. So, when you're reading a book, a textbook, and every example is about a boy, as a woman or a girl, you may feel excluded. Calling someone a sissy, even in a joking way. And again, it's different if you are saying stuff to your brother or sister versus somebody that you work with. It's a different kind of relationship. Using a phrase like Jew down or Indian giver, which really are just very offensive, and yet people can use them without concern because they feel like it's okay. It's a term that really doesn't reflect the Jewish culture, or a term that really doesn't reflect the Indians. And the fact of the matter is, you speak to a Jewish person or a Native American, and they hate those terms. Presuming all Asians are Chinese. Sure, there's over 1 billion Chinese, but there's also over 1 billion Indians, and they come from Southeast Asia. You have Korea, you have Japan, you have the Philippines, you have all of these Asian countries, but presuming that somebody is Chinese is very limiting. It's like assuming all Americans are German. And then this one is very important, consistently mispronouncing someone's name. Here's the thing. Our names represent our identity. And yeah, some of us don't have easy names. And I'm the first person to say that because my name has been mispronounced for my entire life. But if you give someone an opportunity to correct themselves and tell them, no, it's pronounced this way, that person should be respectful enough to make an effort to pronounce the name correctly. So now that we talked about micro-inequities, let's talk about micro-affirmations. And these are little messages we send that validate and recognize other people in a positive and supportive way. And, you don't have to be a manager or a teacher to do this. Just saying to somebody, yeah, your outfit is awesome, or those shoes are great, or you're a terrific writer, whatever it is, that will make the person feel great. And the more positive messages they get on a daily basis, the better they'll feel about themselves. And remember, folks, compliments are free. And, avoid being a stalker or weirdo on the subway who keeps saying nice things to, little girls. But, saying things to your peers, saying things to your coworkers that are complimentary is an excellent way to help build a supportive environment. Now, studies have been done on the impact of micro-affirmations on girls in non-traditional courses like math and engineering and chemistry. This has increased their willingness to take risks. It has enhanced creativity and innovation. It has increased levels of engagement in complex tasks and open-ended thinking. It has improved caring about learning, and it has increased interest in non-traditional fields and the development of a student's self-efficacy which is their sense of competence. Can they be successful in something? So micro-affirmations, whether used for women or men, young people, middle-aged people, or older people, will only result in positive change. And that ultimately is what you as a human being should be striving for in your life, to be a force of positive change. Finally, I just wanted to address the difference between equality and equity. On the left, you will see a visual representation of equality. Each person gets one box, which means the tall guy can see really, really well. The medium-sized guy can just see over the fence, and the short guy can't see anything. Now, equity means that everybody has the same perspective or the same level of where they start with. So the tall guy, he doesn't need a box. The medium-sized guy is good with one box, and the incredibly short guy needs two boxes. But look, now there's equity, and that's what we should be striving for. And this is defined as treating people fairly and justly. And that's what we want to move towards in our lives. So that'll finish today's presentation. If you have any questions, please email or text me. And otherwise, have a fantastic day.